You want to go out live right now to the Oval Office. President Trump going to be making some remarks. Let's listen in here on the economy.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. We're going to have just a quick session with Steve Moore. Everybody knows Steve Moore with the Heritage Foundation, highly respected, one of the most highly respected economists and people that watch your money and know more about your money and your life than probably anybody I can think of. And I want to thank Steve for being here. I saw this today. They came out. What he puts out gets a lot of coverage, and I saw some of them, and then he had a couple of others. And I'd like to ask Steve maybe to discuss a few of these numbers that were just released. I mean, literally just released. And then we're going over, and we're going to do Purple Heart. We have some incredible, brave people that I look forward to, so we're going to do that right after this. Steve, could you say a few words about the various charts?
Thank you, Mr. President. So I called the President because I had some very good news from some new data that we've been able to put together that no one has ever seen before, and I'll just very quickly go through these. So I was telling the President that he did the right thing in calling for a new head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, because this shows that over the last 2 years of the Biden administration, the BLS overestimated job creation by 1.5 million jobs. That's Mr. President, that's a gigantic error. And I don't know if she's, I'm not.
It might not have been an error, that's the bad part. If it was an error, it would be one thing. I don't think it's an error. I think they did it purposely.
Whether that, you may well be right, but even if it wasn't purposefully, it's incompetence.
Right.
Okay, so 1.5 million jobs overestimated. We have access to the some data that no one else does on what has happened month by month with median household income. This is based on unpublished Census Bureau data. It will be released sometime in the next 6 months, but we get an advanced look at it. And so I was telling the President in his first 5 months in office, starting in January through the end of June, the average median household income adjusted for inflation for the average family in America is already up $1,174. That's an
incredible number. Just came out.
Just came out. So that's a giant gain.
And if I would have said this, nobody would have believed it. There's your number. We're doing well.
So the next one compares, we finally have the 2024 data on what happened with real family income in the United States. And so what I did was I compared the record in Donald Trump's first term with the Joe Biden first term. And you can see that, by the way, these dotted lines here, Mr. President, that's COVID. So if it had not been for COVID, these numbers would have been substantially better. But even taking account President Trump's last year in 2020, we saw a $6,400 real after inflation gain in income for the average family. And that compares with Joe Biden, which was a measly $551. So, Mr. President, you gain 10 times more income for the average family than Joe Biden is because of your policies.
And that's taken into consideration COVID, which a lot of times you don't have to do that. But I'm very glad you did.
Over almost 8,000 until
look at that number.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then we looked at which families did the best. And we have data from the Census Bureau that shows by income percentage. So the 25th percentile is the lowest income, 75th percentile is the highest income. And what I find fascinating about this, Mr. President, is every income group did better. The red is President Trump, the blue is President Biden. Every single income group did better under President Trump. But what's really amazing is look what happened under Biden. The lowest income group lost income under Biden. They were poor 4 years after Biden's presidency. No gain virtually whatsoever for the middle class. And the rich was the only group that did better under Biden, which is ironic because Biden keeps saying he was trying to get rid of income inequality. He made income inequality worse, not better. It was President Trump that reduced income inequality.
These numbers just came out, by the way.
Yep. And then finally, these are the numbers just I just showed you in percentage terms. Mr. President, these are the numbers in dollar terms. So even the lowest income, 25th percent, came to about $4,000 in income. That's a lot for a lower income family. $6,400 for the middle class and almost $10,000 for the richest. So you can see every income group did better under Trump than Biden by a wide margin. That's the story.
I think when you look at them, they're all something, but this one chart really says it better than anything. If you look at this is great, but this chart is pretty amazing right here. all new numbers. Okay, so we're going to go now over to East Room, and we're going to celebrate some very brave people.
Trump's efforts to remake the global economy entered a new phase today as U.S. import taxes, otherwise known as tariffs, reached their highest level since the Great Depression. Joining us now, NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans and University of Michigan professor of economics and public policy Justin Wolfers. Welcome back from vacation, Justin. Christine, how are the markets reacting to this today?
You've got stocks down a little bit today, but really it's been a resilient reaction overall to what has been an absolute remaking of the global trade world order, right? And so there are plenty of people out there who think that markets just have been a little bit too blasé about what the potential implications could be. But look, you've got 6 months of this drama back and forth about tariffs, and then now about, a number of hours since these biggest tariffs have really been in effect here. So I think the bigger note, you'll notice it more on your grocery bill probably in the near term than your retirement fund, honestly.
Is it looking likely that the markets will continue to soften the blow or absorb this?
It's unclear. There's a lot of investment because of AI. There's a lot of energy in the tech sector that might be masking other unease. We have seen some companies like the big automakers that have they've said they're taking billion-dollar hits because of tariffs. At some point, they'll try to maybe start passing that on to consumers, and maybe that's what investors are looking forward to. They're looking ahead to maybe lower interest rates down the road, and maybe these companies starting to share the hit they're taking from tariffs and not maybe take it in the corporate earnings alone.
And that is the point that so many people are paying attention to. When are we all going to be paying for this? Justin, Treasury Secretary Scott Besson defended the tariff policies today on Morning Joe. He touted the return of trillions of dollars in investments in domestic manufacturing. Let's listen.
We are trying to rebalance trade in America's favor. President Trump has said, and I've said, we want to bring back the high precision manufacturing jobs. We want to get rid of these big deficits that we have with countries that have created these big surpluses, and the gutted our manufacturing base right, and have been terrible for American workers.
So, Justin, will investments from Apple and other main companies bring back American manufacturing? And what's the timeline, if so?
Well, Ariel, I've got great news for you, which is I'm willing to announce right now on MSNBC that my family is going to invest $101 billion in the United States. Tim Cook, it was just $100 billion, but you have it just as much in writing from me that it'll be $101 billion from my family. And my kids, they want to bring back toy manufacturing. So Oliver and Matilda have each said that they're going to invest themselves another $200 billion in bringing toys back to America. So it's not just the Trump administration. So you sound skeptical
about all of this, is what you're saying.
I'm saying that MSNBC is delivering manufacturing jobs for Americans.
Okay, but answer the question. How long could it be if we're going to bring jobs back to America? You see Apple investing. How long could it be till we see the benefits of that?
So here's the thing. If I'm going to invest money in America, it's going to be based on my expectations of the future profitability of doing business in America. If tariffs work, it's by raising that future expectation. So that means what the White House would have to do is convince executives, not that tariffs are going to be high tomorrow or the next day, but the tariffs are going to be high in 10 years' time or in 20 years' time or 30 years' time, or at least after the cement has set in my manufacturing plant. And the problem is that this is a president who raises tariffs on Monday and reduces them on Tuesday. So the reality is that having a chaotic tariff regime that's unpredictable. And here's another point. Normally what you do with a trade deal is you put it through Congress, which makes it very hard to reverse. This president hasn't done that. So the next president can literally, with a stroke of a pen, with an executive order, undo all of these tariffs. As a result of that, there is not a manufacturing plant in America that's going to get built on the back of these tariffs. And what that means for families at home is we're going to get all the costs of these tariffs. We're going to get higher inflation and pay higher prices at the store, but we're not going to get the benefits because they're not reliable. No one's going to be bringing jobs back home.
Like to still write in. We're going to answer these questions towards the end of the interview here. But what questions do you have about tariffs or these tariff checks? Once again, scan that QR code in the top right-hand corner of your screen if you would like to weigh in. Let's bring in our expert. Joining us now is Ravine Gandhi. He is a tariff and economy expert and founder/former CEO of GMM Nonstick Coatings. Thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox this morning to break this all down for us. We appreciate it.
No, thanks a lot.
So I just read here some numbers. I'm going to read them again. So the White House praising these tariffs, as we've heard there. I just said, though, these tariffs have brought in $28 billion in July. But can you speak to the concern that these tariffs could be putting the cost more on the American taxpayer, the consumers, and the businesses? Can you speak to the other side of that?
Yeah, so, I built a company that served 40 million Americans every day called GMM, and we were very impacted by the tariffs in 2018 and 2019. And I was doing a lot of media back then complaining about the tariffs, saying this is going to crash the economy, saying it's going to cause a recession, saying it's going to cause inflation. But the reality is it didn't. And so now when President Trump enacted these, I have that firsthand experience where I don't actually believe that all of the doomsday people who are complaining about these things really have it right, because the stock market is an all-time high right now. We've got companies beating earnings, and the economy's in a pretty strong place. So that's what I would say to people who are worried that all these terrible things are going to happen.
Yeah, and just on the other side of the coin here, because we do like to bring both sides to our audience here. So Americans expected to pay an average of 18.3% more for imported products, as I just shared before I brought you in here. These checks would be giving back $600 per adult. So could one make the argument, though, that if these rebate checks do happen, because again, this is still proposed right now, how beneficial is this really going to be for the taxpayer?
Well, I think that, as someone who has built these businesses that are very close to the consumer, what we know is that when the consumer has more capital in their pocket, there's more growth. I've seen that at GMM. I've seen that with all the recent startup deals that I invest in. And this is the key thing. This is maybe the first time ever where consumers would get a check in the mail, which is deficit neutral. This is the first time that we're talking about having money going to people that was not actually raised in our own treasury. So I think that that's a very important thing for people who may not even understand on Main Street, well, what is a tariff? But when they get a check in the mail, they're going to like that. And number two, when they come to understand that money actually came from foreign governments who are trying to sell into America, I think that it's going to be pretty pro-growth.
I want to talk about President Trump's recent comments on tariff rebate checks. Because, again, this was introduced because President Trump said, hey, we're looking into this. So how has this had influence on the financial markets? Has it had any influence since he has stated this?
Well, yeah, I do think that, President Trump is all about what I like to call animal spirits. He wants people to feel good about investing in America. And so when he gives money to people based on the fact that he made a lot of other countries blink, when you see the deals that he struck with the EU and with Japan, these are historically asymmetrical deal in the favor of America. And to take some of that revenue and give it to people, I think that it's gonna create a lot of calmness in the market that nothing bad is going to happen.
How could this impact trade relations with other countries, though?
Well, look, if I am one of these rival countries right now that hasn't struck a deal with President Trump, this is going to make me that much likelier to negotiate. Because a lot of people in April, when Liberation Day, when the market sort of cratered, people thought, oh, Trump's just going to back off. But like you've said, we're at an 18% rate right now. And I think that compares to 2% last year. Trump is bringing in tens of hundreds of billions of dollars. And I don't think he's just going to turn that off. So I think that it's going to absolutely be positive from a game theory perspective. And, I'll also tell you, as someone who is kind of a fiscal hawk, I wish they would use all the money to pay down the debt. But I think he's making a pretty smart political calculus here, because he rode in 2024 sort of as the Main Street president. And I think that this is a way where he wants to show his base that what I campaigned on, I'm actually delivering.
So we did ask our viewers to write in some questions here. I did want to get to those before we get back to our discussion here. So let's start bringing up these questions. Thank you to our viewers who did write in. So this question we touched on a little bit earlier here, but how much money can we expect? We do know it's going to be $600 per person, $2,400 per family. So we did touch on that a little bit already there, but maybe we have another question we can switch on. Thank you for writing in, Lay. Let's see. Do we have anything else? All right. When will citizens receive tax cuts in place of tariffs as promised by President Trump? Ravine, can you speak to that for us?
When will they receive tax cuts instead of tariffs or based on tariffs?
Well, let's see. This says, when will citizens receive tax cuts in place of tariffs as promised by President Trump? Could you just speak to maybe what President Trump has said in terms of tax cuts?
Yeah, he has said some things that are pretty amazing if they were to actually happen. He has floated the idea of not even having an income tax if tariff revenue continues to be high. And I believe he said it was for everyone making something under, it was either $100,000 or $200,000 would pay no tax. Now, I don't think that that is going to happen. I mean, if it does, I think the sky's the limit because Americans, his job approval rating will probably be 80% at that point. But I think that this sort of dividend that he's declaring is a good first step towards effectuating some actual relief to Main Street with tariffs. But, we'll see what has to happen in terms of Congress actually getting rid of the income tax.
Andrew, Elise here. Donald Trump won at the end of the day because voters were dissatisfied with Biden's economy. And the Biden administration had been a little tone deaf, pushing Bidenomics when so much of the country was hurting. Do you think that now Donald Trump is falling into the same trap of trying to message that everything is okay while ignoring the real discontent among American voters?
I think that he's exacerbating the problem because he promised people that inflation would end. It's a direct quote from his RNC speech in 2024, and that it would end fast. But now people see that as a direct consequence of his actions, of these tariffs, which are the biggest tax increase on working people since the 1930s, their costs are going up. And he keeps treating people like they're stupid. That's what he's doing with the Epstein files. Like he thinks it's not evident to everybody that he's not terrified. There's something in there about him. And he's doing the same thing on the economy. He fired the nonpartisan official who's in charge of jobs numbers because he didn't like the result. Job growth is going down because of these tariffs. And he thinks that somehow if he hides the numbers, people won't know. I think that offends folks, including a lot of his supporters.
Terry, let's talk specifically about some of the job numbers that are going down, because you and I are old enough to remember when Donald Trump began this whole tariff parade, that his argument to Americans was, don't worry, it's going to bring manufacturing back to the United States. Let's check in on how that's going. This is from the Wall Street Journal. The manufacturing sector lost a total of about 26,000 jobs in May and June, and another preliminary estimate of 11,000 jobs in July. Even if some firms do reshore production, how fast that can be achieved is in question. Oliver Allen, U.S. economist at Pantheon Macroeconomics, I loved this, compares U.S. manufacturing to a person who hasn't gone to the gym in 30 years. Quote, getting him to bench press 100 pounds is going to be quite difficult. I don't even hear them talking about manufacturing anymore.
Not much. You wonder where it's going to go when they take away things like the energy tax credits, right, which were employing a lot of people in a new part of the economy, which were the innovation of that in battery technology, were leading the way on manufacturing inside the U.S. I don't think we're seeing it. And I think we're seeing a president who's really off of his game. We see a guy who said that groceries was what got him elected, and yet he ignores these grocery prices and says, in fact, that prices are going to go up with new tariffs. I think this president has lost a step, and we're going to hear about it as we position ourselves for these town hall meetings that we'll see more of through August.
Andrew, you raised a point a little bit ago about the revenue that's coming, that's being generated and all of this. And you've got Trump out here, interestingly enough, beating his chest and bragging about the fact that all this revenue is coming in. But there's a little bit of reality here I want to put on the table from Politico, noting that the promises that have been made about this revenue may backfire. Several companies and states have challenged Trump's use of an emergency law to impose some of his duties on individual countries. As part of the case, companies have demanded the federal government pay them back for the tariff fees they've already paid out. This would undercut one of the core arguments Trump has made to justify his trade agenda, that his tariffs are bringing in unprecedented revenue that can help pay for his tax cuts. Folks, he lying to you, all right? That's the bottom line, because A, it's a tax, right? B, if the courts rule against him, they have to pay that money back. Talk about what this lie means for the American people.
You're right that it's fraught on legal grounds, and I think it's even more fraught on political grounds, because when he brags about taking in hundreds of billions of dollars through tariffs, he's bragging about raising costs that working people pay. Yep. Again, this is the biggest tax on working families since the Great Depression. And they're taking that money and putting it straight into the pockets of billionaire donors like the other people on the Epstein list, along with Donald Trump. And that kind of special treatment for corrupt elites is the exact opposite of what people were promised. And I think they're outraged by it.
President Trump just declared, once again, that we're winning big economically, but the only thing big right now is the gap between rhetoric and reality. While Trump stands in the Oval Office touting charts and cherry-picked numbers, Americans across the country are staring at grocery bills they can't afford, rent spikes they can't manage, and gas prices that still sting every time they fill up. His economic message is clear. Ignore your empty wallet. Just trust the charts. But here's the truth. Those flashy numbers Trump proudly waves around? They're built on shaky foundations and selective data. He even replaced nonpartisan labor officials because job numbers didn't match his narrative. His team claims household income has risen, but they're using unpublished data that doesn't reflect the daily struggle of working-class Americans. And those sectors he promised to revive, like manufacturing, are still losing jobs. The Wall Street Journal reported over 35,000 manufacturing jobs vanished this summer alone. That's not winning. That's decline. What Trump is really celebrating is a tariff-fueled system that inflates costs for families while handing billions in tax breaks to the wealthy. He claims tariffs bring in historic revenue, but that money doesn't come from foreign governments. It comes from us. American businesses and households are footing the bill, paying more for imports while Trump calls it a win. He's even floating income tax cuts based on tariff revenue that might not survive court challenges. Companies are already suing to recover fees, and if they win, Trump's historic revenue disappears. Meanwhile, he brags about reducing income inequality, but the data says otherwise. The poor lost income under Biden, yes, but under Trump, inequality grew, and the rich saw the largest gains. He governs for donors while selling slogans to the rest. Even his messaging is chaos. One day he's pro-tariff, the next day he reverses it. No business wants to invest in a system that changes on a whim. And let's be real, his promise to bring back American manufacturing has stalled. Job losses, not gains, are the trend. Innovation sectors like clean energy, where real growth is happening, get ignored, while Trump touts old solutions for new problems. And now he's pretending the American people don't notice. But they do. They see prices rising, wages stagnating, and rents spiraling out of control. Trump says, "We're doing great," but the only ones feeling great are the ones who got tax cuts, stock options, or tariff kickbacks. Everyone else is left juggling bills and wondering why the president insists everything's fine. So let's stop pretending. This isn't leadership. It's branding, and it's branding that's out of touch with reality. If you're not a billionaire or a corporate insider, then this economy isn't winning big for you. It's winning for them, not for us. So here's the question. Are we really doing well, or is Trump just spinning another story he hopes you'll buy? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit like if you're tired of being sold fake victories. And share this video if you believe real people deserve real solutions, not just sound bites.